Monday, that if I ever see it.
Good afternoon. Today is January 25th. Welcome to the Ways and Means Committee. Thank you, everyone. We had some technical difficulties, but we have worked our way through that. So thank you to the staff here and to OIS, which is now OIT, I think. So we will go ahead and get started. Today we have a briefing on the inclusive playground framework. And I just want to let our guests know we have a couple people missing because people are getting sick around here. So they are not with us today. It's not that they didn't want to see you all. And so I will ask us, the Secretary of Disabilities, my constituent, to please come forward, Carol Beatty. And we also have Rachel London with us, the Executive Director of the Maryland Developmental Disabilities Council. And I also would like everyone to welcome former Delegate Deputy Secretary Lisa Belcastro is here as well. And whenever you're ready, and everyone has these on their desks.
Hey, good morning, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, and members of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, my name is Carol Beatty. I am the Secretary for the Maryland Department of Disabilities. And thank you so much for allowing us some time to provide the committee members information about the work that we are doing along with the Developmental Disabilities Council to expand inclusive playgrounds throughout our state. At the department, we know how important it is to ensure that people with disabilities are not left behind, and that as our state changes and evolves to better serve Marylanders, we are taking them into consideration. The COVID pandemic brought to the forefront the need to improve access to health and wellness for people with disabilities. And that included, in the broadest sense, the goal of good health in terms of social, emotional, spiritual, and of course, physical wellness opportunities. So the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, requires physical access to places and services, including playgrounds and recreational facilities. However, we are advocating for and educating about the need for inclusive spaces, which moves beyond mere physical access. Inclusive playgrounds are designed to give access as well as to encourage interaction and play with and between all children and all adults. Over the past 2 years, the department and the DD Council have worked in collaboration with other stakeholders, including the Department of Natural Resources, to expand inclusive playgrounds all across our state. As part of this work, an inclusive playground framework was created, and I believe that you have copies of the framework. This was the first step in what will be an ever-evolving plan to consolidate information and resources, communicate about new efforts, and ultimately to make Maryland the state that leads in the development of truly inclusive play spaces. Thank you again for allowing us to share with the committee members this exciting work thus far and what the next steps will be. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Rachel London, the Executive Director of the DD Council.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, good morning. I am Rachel London, the Executive Director of the DD Council, as you have heard. And I'm going to go a little bit more into what you have in front of you, the framework and the toolkit. But before I do, I want to take a minute and recognize some of the critical players who are in the room. First, Dr. Stephanie Dollimore, our Deputy Director of the DD Council. Of course, you know Deputy Secretary Lisa Belcastro, and Kirsten Bozak, the Director of Health and Behavioral Health Policy at the Department of Disabilities. Really critical in getting to what you now have in front of us. They're also here to help answer any questions if there are any, and we can't do that. So I also want to take a second to recognize that first photo you saw of the playground. A few of you in this room may have recognized it. It was Laura's playground at Blandale Park in Howard County. So I did want to mention that. I know many of you know me, and I've heard this before, but just sort of as a reminder, the Developmental Disabilities Council is now, thanks to you all last year, an independent unit of the state government. We are 100% federally funded, specifically to create change, to make it possible for people with developmental disabilities to live the lives they want with the support that they need. We are led by about 30 council members, the majority of whom, over 60% of whom are actually people with developmental disabilities and their family members. And we have a very small but mighty team. There's 4 of us that work very diligently to make sure Maryland is a place where people with and without disabilities live, learn, work, and play together. One of the big things that the council does, my board, is develop a 5-year state plan. It guides our work over those 5 years. This 5-year plan includes a lot of issues that affect children, adults, and families, but it also includes inclusive recreation. In fact, our 3 goals really focus around the person. We want people with developmental disabilities to be leaders and advocates themselves. We want people to be empowered to live the lives they want with the support they need. And we want people to have access to their communities and their service and sports. We want them to be treated with dignity and respect. And that really aligns with this project that we partnered on, as you heard, a couple of years ago. Specifically in our state plan is that we will advocate, but we will also fund inclusive recreation programs and activities that are fully accessible. So why playgrounds? Why did we join in making sure that our Maryland playgrounds were more inclusive, not just accessible, but inclusive to more Marylanders? Well, as you heard, they provide opportunities to develop social skills, try new things in a safe place, and build independence. Same for all kids. And we also recognize that Maryland needs more of these playgrounds where children and their families can play. And now you also know that both of us have these goals in our state plans. And you also heard that the ADA requires playgrounds to be accessible, but accessibility does not equal inclusion. And this is really a critical part of the framework. We want communities to really have a clear understanding of what accessible and inclusive mean and how they are different. So I'm going to take 1 minute to provide kind of a few examples. Let's say your local playground has mulch. Well, mulch is considered accessible by the ADA if it is maintained daily and can actually be rolled on, walked on, and all of those things. Does that make it inclusive? Probably not, because what could also happen? Someone who uses a wheelchair could maybe get to the edge of that mulch. So they're in the playground, but they can't actually get onto the mulch and as close as their peers without disabilities or their peers that don't use wheelchairs. Another great example are communication boards. I know we've talked about communication boards over the last couple of years. And they are boards with pictures. I'm sorry, I don't have a picture of one, that allow people to go over to them and show their friends what they want to do or what they're trying to say if they cannot speak those words. More often than not, there's also Braille. So their friends that use Braille can do the same thing. When we also think about inclusive playgrounds, we've talked about we want a path to the playground and the structures on them. We want ramps to the coolest parts of it, right? It's great to have a really cool playground with all these things that kids are maybe running to, but do they have ramps so that their friends who use wheelchairs or walkers can get to them too? We want accessible bathrooms that are close by. Maybe their parents have a disability and need the accessible bathroom, right? We want the families to be able to be included too. And thanks to you all, any new playgrounds are going to have adult changing tables and facilities for adults that need them. We often see in a truly inclusive playground, sensory play opportunities, quiet areas, and signs in a variety of different methods, right? So we may see pictures, like I said, we may see Braille, we may see words, and we may see even large print. And it's really all of those opportunities that make a playground truly inclusive. So you also know the benefits of playgrounds for kids, right? They're no different for children with disabilities. You promote health and wellness, and that social participation and working together. I've also spent a lot of time talking about the benefits of kids with and without disabilities doing all of the things together, right? Living, learning, working, and playing. And I'm probably won't be the last time this session that you hear me talk about those things. But it is really that reason that the council and the department partnered to do this. Maryland can and should do more to eliminate any barriers and promote more of that togetherness. So what does the framework do? You see it in front of you. We've talked about this. It defines what inclusive really means. It shows the differences between inclusive and accessible, talks about the benefits, some of which I just described, and it has toolkits, the actual sort of how-to, the resources for planning, designing, and implementing. And it is all in plain language, something that we both feel very strongly about. So how do we think people are going to use the framework? So we really did develop it for locals and municipalities and community organizations as a starting point, right? And we really want to emphasize the recommendations to engage and include the local disability community. Finding out what that community needs and wants in a playground is critical. We often don't see the people who would be impacted by a truly inclusive playground being part of the designing of that playground. So there are tips and resources in there to build coalitions and involve people with disabilities specifically. So the toolkit itself has 6 parts. And each of those 6 sections describes why that piece is important, and then it provides additional resources. So you'll see in the framework, and for those of you who are not looking at the framework online, they are create a committee and build collaboration, assess your resources, funding, of course, universal design, freedom of choice, and safety. That's sort of the overview of the framework. So what are we going to do now? We have this framework and we are promoting it and we are talking about it, and we're going to continue to do outreach and develop even more partners and get this into the hands of as many people as possible. We are also going to develop a website that actually has this framework in an interactive way that will actually take the framework to the next step and provide even more information and resources about each of those pieces so that users, whether that be local government, state government, community members, or individuals themselves, can get more information. We are also going to put an interactive map on that website that shows where the inclusive playgrounds are already and what features they have that truly make them inclusive. So if they have, for example, a swing that anyone can use, or even if you're in a wheelchair, we will have a picture of that and it will be in the map where we have that playground. We really see it as an interactive learning so people know exactly where they're going and what they are going to have when they get there. The next thing we're going to do is continue the education and really work with the communities to make sure they understand the framework and make sure they have the resources from the framework that they need. What does that look like? Probably technical assistance. The council certainly has a lot of experience working with community organizations, funding technical assistance. And one vision right now is to create a fund to help plan inclusive playgrounds. So if a local community needs help to plan, how are they going to do that? That there would be funding available for that level of technical assistance. And then finally, it's not just about the planning, right? Sometimes you might already have a plan. In fact, I learned yesterday that one county was already putting together a work group to look at all of their playgrounds. So maybe they have a plan. The inclusive features sometimes do cost more. And exploring options with existing available funding mechanisms that could potentially pay for those features that may cost more money. So the bottom line is playgrounds need to be welcoming and usable for everyone. You've heard how accessible doesn't mean inclusive, and that many accessible playgrounds still potentially isolate people with disabilities to one part of that playground. We partnered to create this framework and will continue to partner to help change that. If we use this framework to create more inclusive playgrounds, we will create a more inclusive Maryland. So finally, thank you. Happy to answer any questions. And again, just want to acknowledge that there was an extensive advisor group. The list is on the back of the front cover in your book that shared feedback on the content and really helped guide us as we drafted that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any questions from anyone? I have a couple questions. Oh, well, I see Mayor Cunor. Okay, Delegate Mayor Cunor.
Considered putting the website in multiple languages? I know that's a recent phenomenon. Okay, hit me. Yes, that's my quick question. Thank you.
No, but I want to verbally, yes, the council is committed to making sure every website we have, ours included, is accessible to everyone. So our first criteria will be that it will be in plain language, like our current website, and that it will be available in other languages. Absolutely.
Yeah, I know, at least with my kids' school, there's some kind of ability through Google where if you click on a button and you choose multiple languages, I'm fascinated how many languages you can put these English text in. So just inquire them at the website. Thank you so much.
Delegate Hornberger.
Madam Chair, and I deeply appreciate the efforts here, because in this committee, we sometimes have piecemeal approaches to things where they're looking at signage or they're looking at a particular piece of equipment. And this holistic approach is awesome. So I really applaud you for that. The question that I had is because these are new materials and they look very different from the playgrounds that we grew up on. Has there been any attention to like a SDS sheet or the materials that are being used to produce the equipment? Because sometimes, we get feedback about the rubberized mats and they're off-gassing, or they have a special coating on there that, because this population is different than your average child. So they're exposed to the equipment in a different way as well. So I didn't see that in the report, but I just wanted to add the pamphlet that you've given us here. But was there any attention put to the materials that were used in the finishes?
I'm going to defer to my researchers back here.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Dallimore, the Deputy Director for the Council. I will say that in this particular report, we had to put some boundaries on how far into the scope of things we dug into. We have had multiple conversations with different vendors about their materials, and we're learning about all the various kinds of certifications that need to happen around holistic safety. We really do believe in making sure that
great.
all aspects are considered.
Yeah, so I applaud that as well. And because that is a big part of this, the fit and finish and specs and all that stuff that go into it. So thank you and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
That answered Delegate Patterson's question as well. Delegate Attar.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for this presentation. This is amazing and it's absolutely needed. My question is, I know like right now in my district, there are some low-income neighborhoods that they don't I don't see parks or I don't see nice playgrounds. What outreach are you doing? I know you said you're working with local organizations. What outreach are you doing so they know that this is available and you're here to help them make this happen?
I was gonna say.
Yeah. Stephanie Dallimore again, and Kirsten, please add too. We, again, for the first step, had to put some boundaries on how deep we were going to do into the research, but we have acknowledged in our working group and identified that different school locations have playgrounds, housing locations have playgrounds. There's so many churches and other places of religious worship, right? So there's many different places we need to think about where these playgrounds are. For this iteration of the project, we focused on public parks. And we were specifically looking at the state level, but there are so many different places where we need to be making inroads here. And so we are making outreach into different jurisdictions to talk to them about where these other parks are located. So it's a really important part. Kirsten, do you want to add?
Kirsten Bozak, Department of Disabilities. Can you tell it's my first time? So the other point I just wanted to mention too is that we have done a couple of these presentations. So one of the biggest presentations we've done to date has been at MACO to the Parks and Rec affiliates. And so they are aware of this project. There have been a few communities that have reached out to talk to us specifically, and we are continuing to inroad into those areas as well. We are speaking later in the year at the ADA Inclusion Summit. So we're really trying to engage communities. And back to Rachel's point about the technical assistance, we're really hoping that we can work with those communities to prioritize this for their localities to see and develop this programming and highlight the funding for it. So I will also just mention that we understand that Maryland is vast and there are different community sizes and funding streams and all of those things. And we are cognizant of it and appreciate that. And we want to make sure this is available and accessible to every community in Maryland. Thank you
for that.
Delegate Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for bringing this to us today. Question, have you reached out to MSDE or the IAC, areas like that, the Special Education Department? Because, you know, in my community, a lot of the parks are right next to the schools. And as we are building more elementary schools, we want to make sure that they have access to studies and what makes an awesome playground.
So funny that you mentioned that. I happen to do a lot of work with the State Department of Education and sit on the Special Ed State Advisory Committee, which had a half-an-hour discussion about this framework and the playgrounds at different schools or those that are close to schools yesterday with the new Assistant Superintendent for Special Education. So it is something that committee wants to focus on, and that the assistant superintendent yesterday actually said was critically important. So that is just the beginning, but certainly we know that the schools and other, public and private schools have playgrounds, and that if they're not on the grounds, they are very close by. Mm-hmm.
Any further questions from the committee? I'll just ask, I'm just curious, how many of these types of playgrounds are there in the state of Maryland right now? Like
Truly inclusive or accessible?
truly inclusive? Like, so Blandair is truly inclusive, right?
Yes.
Okay, so how many like that?
I think we are remiss in giving you a specific number because we haven't visited them all.
Okay.
And sometimes when people say they are truly inclusive, we have in fact gone and they maybe had a barrier to something, meaning that it's not truly inclusive. But yes, we would hold up Blandair. There are couple of others that I can name off the top of my head. But because when they've been lifted up that way and we've gone and they haven't truly been, wouldn't want to give you a number,
Okay.
but I'm comfortable saying not very many.
Okay, thank you. I think if Bland Air in Howard County is amazing. It is truly inclusive. I mean, camps go there. I've met some of my colleagues from the General Assembly there with our kids to hang out. It's just an amazing place. And if you live anywhere near Howard County, I suggest you go visit and bring your kids or your niece or whomever to get an idea of what they're talking about, because it's really just a fantastic place for all kids to be, quite frankly. So,
And Madam Chair, they're going to be having adult changing facilities very soon.
Yeah.
even more reason for some of you to go. Okay, well, I think that concludes it for today. Thank you, and thank you for your patience with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.